Hi friends, welcome to another What We Eat in a Week video. This week is going to be vegetable packed, protein packed, with lots of bone broth too. It's a really busy week, so I'm going to show you how I managed to get all of those good nutrients in even though I'm out a lot this week. I don't have an awful lot of time in the evening to cook, but I really want my family to eat homemade, from scratch food that's got lots of nutrients in it. Now, this first meal, I started off in the afternoon and I'm starting by doing a dry rub on some chicken thighs. So I'm just adding whatever herbs and spices I think will taste good together. So some paprika, some garlic, some parsley, some thyme, and I'm gonna add some salt and let that sit while I prepare the vegetables. Now this is going to be just a basic oven bake, really. So I'm going to chop up loads and loads of vegetables, put them in that baking dish that you can see there. I'll cook the vegetables first and then add the chicken thighs on the top of the vegetables when they've cooked down a little bit and leave that to cook for another probably half an hour or so. So I love this kind of meal. It's so simple. It just really involves cooking vegetables, adding a bit of seasoning, and then the oven does all of the hard work. And I can serve that on its own with bread or with rice. And it ends up just being a really healthy, nutrient-dense dinner for everybody. So in terms of the vegetables, I'm going to go with more summer vegetables this time. And it's really what I had in the fridge. So courgettes, peppers, I had half a squash left over and I put that in too, some onions and some other things that you'll see me chop up here. I'm chopping them up into 1 centimeter cubes, I suppose, just so that it'll cook quite quickly. And this ends up being more of a ratatouille than a roasted vegetable dish because when you add a lot of vegetables into a baking dish like that, it cooks down and makes more of a sauce. So if you want a drier, more caramelized one, you need to probably add less vegetables and spread them out on a baking tray. And I do that quite often because we do like roast vegetables, but today I wanted to have a lot of vegetables in there, and this was a really good way to just pack in a load of vegetables. So I'm not really following a recipe. In fact, all of the recipes this week are really off the top of my head with what I've got in the fridge. And, I've got a vague idea of where I'm going with it when I start, but I'm kind of making it up as I go along. And to be honest, you can really do that with a lot of savoury recipes. You don't need to follow a recipe closely. You can see what you have, imagine what might go well together. And if you've got a few principles of how to roast vegetables, for example, or how long it takes to cook meat in an oven, or that kind of thing. If you have just a few skills, then you are really able to pull together a very, very simple meal without having to follow a recipe, without having to buy lots of fancy ingredients. And it does end up tasting really good. And there's such a sense of satisfaction when you know that this has just come out of your imagination. And when everybody's really enjoying it, you think, I made that, that's mine, and I'm really proud of it. So as you saw, in here I've got courgettes, aubergines, peppers, tomatoes, which are going to make a really good sauce. I've got some squash in there. I added a few cloves of garlic, and I'm putting a lot of olive oil in there just so that it'll really add some good healthy fat. Lots of salt. I didn't actually add enough salt. We had to add more when we were eating it. So make sure you do add enough salt. Don't be scared of salt. It is not bad for you. If you have too much of it in pre-prepared food, then it is bad for you. But when you're adding your own salt, you really need to make sure that you get that flavor there, and your body does need salt. So I put that in the oven for half an hour so that it would start cooking, because there were a lot of vegetables there. And as you can see, the vegetables have started to soften down, but they do need to cook further. So now I'm going to place the spiced chicken thighs on top of there and put it in the oven for another half an hour. Now, if I was going to be doing this again, I would probably let the vegetables cook for 45 minutes, put the chicken on and just let the chicken cook for 20 minutes because it was a little bit overdone. So you live and learn. If I make this again, I will definitely be cooking the vegetables longer on their own and adding the chicken later. Now this does look like a lot of food, and it is, but if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that my children have food allergies, and so they have to take food to school every day. And so what I tend to do is I make double the amount that we will actually eat in the evening, and then they can take leftovers the next day to school. And that works really well for us. They get a good healthy lunch. I don't have to rely on pre-made food because in any case I can't, because there's nothing that they can eat that I can buy pre-made. So this is a really good system for us. I tend to make the dinner early afternoon, then I'm available for them when they come home from school. We can do homework together, and I just warm up the dinner in the evening when everybody's home and ready to eat. Now we're on to our next meal, which is something I've never tried before, but I saw on a video from the Duval homestead. It was a cabbage and sausage soup, and I thought that sounded really good. I love cabbage, and these are my favourite cabbages. They're the pointy ones. They're called sweetheart cabbages in England. I love the name and I love the flavour. So I thought I'd give it a go. I didn't follow a recipe again. I made it up off the top of my head. Basically, I fried the sausages first, and then I cut them up before adding them to the soup because I thought then that way they would be browned nicely and would give a lot of flavour to the soup. So again, it's the middle of the afternoon and I'm slicing up some onions. I'm going to slice up the cabbage and get this soup going. I've put quite a lot of onion in there. I think I put 2 onions in total, and I'm just going to let them soften down in my Dutch oven. I'm keeping an eye on these sausages. These are sausages that we bought from the farm when we ordered half a pig. At the moment we have half a pig in our freezer, but we're really enjoying that meat. And these sausages are really unusual. They're not very fatty at all, so I didn't put any fat in the pan, and they're really not giving out very much fat. So we're enjoying them. They're so tasty, so different to the ones you can buy in the supermarket, and really good. So they're busy browning in the saucepan, and I'm on to slicing up the cabbage. I love this variety of cabbage. It's very sweet, very tasty. It doesn't have a strong flavour at all. And so if you're not sure you like cabbage, I would suggest starting with this variety. So again, it's called sweetheart cabbage in English, and in French it's called pointy cabbage, which is quite funny, I think, too. But yes, we really like this one. I'm also adding some celery, which I'm chopping really finely because some of my children don't like it, and a little bit of carrot. Now the carrot I'm cutting up into quite large chunks because I want it to be a chunky soup. I'm going to slice the sausage quite thickly, and the cabbage was sliced thickly as well. So I'm just trying to get that chunky texture in there. Now this bit was my absolute favourite. I remembered I'd got some fennel seeds in my cupboard. I don't use fennel very often, but I thought it would go really well with the sausage and the cabbage, so I popped it in there, and I can already smell that fragrant fennel flavour coming through. It was really good. I'm really glad that I put that fennel in there. It goes really well with any pork dish, and especially with sausage. So once the carrots, the onion and the celery have softened a little bit, I put the cabbage in there too, let that soften for a while before I add my bone broth. And again, I make my own bone broth from leftover chicken bones, and I will put the video in the top right corner where I show you how to make that bone broth. I'm taking the sausages out of the pan. They're not completely cooked, but that's fine because they're going to carry on cooking once they're in the soup. So as I said before, I'm slicing them quite thickly. Then I'm going to add them to the soup pan and let the whole thing cook for another 30 minutes. So last night when I made the chicken and the vegetables, I was heading out early evening for a parent-teacher meeting, and my husband had to get dinner ready for the kids when he got home from work. So he just could pull out that dinner from the oven and it was ready and just had to be put on plates. This meal was actually for some friends that were coming over that evening before we had our house group. And again, I just made it in the afternoon and I could heat it up really easily just before they came. And we had this delicious, healthy dinner that was totally ready when we were ready to sit down at the table, and I could just enjoy their company. This was a really tasty dinner, and I will definitely be making it again. Now we're on to the next day, and I'm quite excited because my husband and I are actually going to a concert at the Philharmonie de Paris tonight to see one of my favourite pieces of music for his Requiem. And I'm so excited because we very rarely go out, and it's even more rare that we go and see a concert, but it's one of my favourite things to do because I'm actually a musician. That's my job. I'm a singing teacher and I used to run a choir, and I just love music, especially live music. So this is a real treat for me, but I still have to get dinner ready for the children before we go. So I'm whipping up some stuffed omelettes, and this is something my dad used to make. He used to call it farmhouse omelettes. So it's just a basic omelette, but jam-packed with vegetables. So before I go and get ready to go out, I'm getting the vegetables on, and they're going to just fry gently while I go and get ready, and then I'll finish the omelettes afterwards. So for the vegetables, I'm doing more peppers, some courgettes, some leeks, some onion, and I also put some mushrooms in there. So they're just going to fry until they're nice and soft. I'm going to add a little bit of seasoning, just some salt, maybe some pepper. And it's a really simple recipe, just involves chopping and frying vegetables and making an omelette. It's as simple as that. added a little bit of dried parsley for some extra flavour, and I think if you wanted to you could add some bacon or maybe some ham to that too. That would taste really good. I'm just grating up some cheddar cheese. For those of us that can eat dairy, we're going to sprinkle some of that in there too to make it a little bit richer and even more delicious. So now I'm ready to go out. I've put my apron on just so I don't get into a mess, and I'm going to get started on the omelettes. I usually use about 2 eggs per person for an omelette. I'll whisk the eggs up together with a little bit of salt and pepper and then cook them on a medium-low heat. Now, I'm not an expert omelette maker, so if any of you have got any suggestions how to make a really good omelette, then I would be very happy to hear from you in the comments below. But my dad taught me to do it this way. He taught me to turn the heat down and to bring in the egg mixture as it solidifies into the middle so that the runny egg can reach the outside and cook evenly. So that's what I did. It didn't turn out brilliant. I shall have to do some more omelettes to practice, but it was very tasty. Now we like to have runny omelettes, so I don't cook it all the way through. I leave it a little bit runny on the top. Then I just add the vegetable mixture onto there. And for those that are having dairy, I will sprinkle a little bit of cheddar. And for those that can't have the dairy, they'll just have the vegetables or maybe some ham and bacon. And there we are. It's a really, really easy, quick dinner, which is perfectly for an evening when we're heading out of the door in 10 minutes time. So these omelettes each feed 2 people. So there's plenty of vegetables in there, enough for 2 of us. On with the cheese, and I'll let that melt just a little bit with the heat of the omelette. So as you can see, this one broke, but you know, with cooking, you just have to let go of being a perfectionist. If it doesn't look amazing, that's fine. The important thing is that it's got lots of nutrients in there and tastes really good, which these absolutely did. And now we're on to the final recipe. This is actually the only evening of the week I'm actually in, and it's the final one because on Friday night, so the day after this, we were invited to a last-minute birthday party, and I just didn't have time during the day to get anything together at all for the children, so they had to fend for themselves and have fried eggs or whatever else they could get their hands on. Thankfully, I have an older daughter who's now in university, and she's really helpful when it comes to babysitting and getting dinner on the table for the children. So I'm afraid I've only got 4 meals to show you this week. But anyway, this last recipe is a meatball soup. So I'm using a mixture of minced pork and minced beef. I'm adding some herbs and spices into the meat and some seasoning too. And I'm just going to take that mixture and make some small balls with it. I like to use a cookie scoop just so that I get a similar size of meatball every time. Now this is one recipe where you really have to get in there with your hands to be able to get it mixed up really well. And I did make a mistake. You won't be able to tell, but I did make a mistake with this. I had 2 packets of minced beef in the freezer, and I took out the larger packet and not the smaller packet. So I've got 500 grams of minced pork in there and 1 kilo of minced beef. And I think it would have been better if I'd got half and half, 500 grams of each. I'm just browning off those meatballs in some pork fat in a frying pan before I get started on the rest of the soup. So once again, I'm chopping up vegetables and today it's more onion, more garlic, more carrots, more courgettes, more celery, and more peppers. But that's what we really enjoy eating. I will link the recipe that I based this soup on, and now I did follow it very, very loosely, especially as the original recipe has pasta in it, and obviously I can't use pasta with my children that can't eat gluten. So I'm following it very loosely, which I suggest you do too. You know, you don't need to buy special ingredients. You can see what you can substitute that you already have, especially with herbs and spices and things, and with the vegetables that you want to add in there too. You can really just go with what you have. I'm adding more herbs and spices, some paprika, some parsley, some thyme, and that all just helps to add the flavour and make a really rich, delicious soup. And again, don't be afraid of adding salt, especially if you're not using any salted ingredients. You really need to make sure you've got enough in there, otherwise the taste will be just rather insipid. I didn't add enough in this soup, unfortunately, so it would have definitely been better if I'd have tasted it and added a bit more. I'm adding a tiny bit of chili in there. I don't add very much because most of my children don't enjoy it. So if I do add some, I'm really careful to only add a very small amount. In with the tomatoes. Now, I don't know if you realise this, but a lot of canned tomatoes have added water. So if you want to get a rich tomato flavour, you need to make sure you're buying canned tomatoes that have got a really high percentage of tomatoes in there. So for instance, our supermarket brand has, I think, 60% or 64% tomatoes in. And this brand of canned tomatoes that I get from Costco, they have 98% of tomatoes in. So it's a really big difference, and you can really tell the difference. So go ahead and look next time you're shopping and see if you can pick up some of these canned tomatoes, especially when they're on special offer. If you can get the ones with a higher tomato content, then you'll definitely notice a difference. I'm using some more bone broth here. We love using bone broth. It adds so much flavour, and I feel really good about all of the nutrients that it's adding to the soup. Now, I don't know why, but I don't seem to be able to get my bone brothed gel as I see other people doing. So if you've got any tips for me on that and how I can get my bone brothed gel and just a lot more collagen in there, I would be really happy to hear from you. So the meatballs are finished browning and I'm popping them in the soup, and they will simmer in there probably for another half an hour or so. Look at that veggie packed soup, doesn't that look good? We really enjoyed this, and it's another recipe that will be going on our regular rotation, I'm sure. We served it with rice, and I think it'd be really good with a dollop of cream and maybe some cheese on there too, just to make it a little bit richer and even more delicious. If you enjoyed this week's video, I would love it if you would like, comment and subscribe. I make videos every week on homemade food from scratch, allergy-friendly meal ideas and lots of sourdough. See you next time. Bye!